Crow has a story to tell about Isabella, the mistress that he serves. She looks at a girl walking down the street, calling her a wench born in a pigsty, and saying she isn't fit in their academy's halls. With a menacing look, she vows to make it clear just how deep the chasm between them is. In the kingdom of Farlant's Royal Magic Academy, students gossip and murmur about Maria, a scholarship student who's fallen wet on the floor. They mockingly ask what happened. Isabella, the Duke's daughter, stands over her, saying she shouldn't inconvenience everyone by lying on the path. The girl's words strike the poor student, knowing it's their fault she fell in the first place. They feign ignorance and offense, insisting that she's falsely accusing the noble, who was only showing concern. Meanwhile, Crow looked on in silence. Honestly speaking, he witnessed how his master actually was the main culprit. Maria argues that it was magic, as there's no way a puddle would magically appear below her. She's in disbelief, feeling that it isn't right to use magic for such purposes. The nobility of the kingdom have been using magic to develop the country for countless generations. As a result, a commoner like Maria, who was accepted through a special scholarship, is seen as a terrible eyesore for many students. However, that's not the only reason she's garnered enemies. A voice cut through, demanding to know what's going on, and everyone staggered back upon seeing Albert, the crown prince, defending the poor girl. With dazzling eyes, he looked at Maria, asking if she's okay. As the two spoke closely, the others murmured about how he didn't even acknowledge Isabella, who's his fiancée. The sight irks the Duke's daughter, and she scowls at the young man. Keeping herself under control, she regained her smile, politely curtsying and asking why he's there. He came by, wondering what was going on after he saw them ganging up on Maria. However, the girls insist that she fell over by herself, ridding themselves of fault. Just then, Leon, a count's son, says they're playing dumb after harassing her like always. The other reason the commoner angers Crow's master so much is because the sons of influential nobles have all been ensnared by her charms, forming a type of harem. Isabella doesn't bat an eye, saying he's wrongfully condemning her the moment things go wrong. As such, she threatens to respond in kind, using her family's name and status, which are above his. This makes him back away, fearing for his future. She cackles at his easy retreat, having expected a bit more entertainment, considering his vigor. Seeing him shake, Albert orders Leon to stand down and tells Isabella to stop tormenting his friends. She counters, telling him to choose better friends, as such low characters would drag his reputation down. He sternly states that his relationships are none of her business. Just then, the school bell rang, cutting their conversation short. Hearing this, the Duke's daughter excused herself, not wanting to be late to her next class. After all, she's of utmost importance as the crown prince's fiancée. As they parted ways, Crow bowed his head to the students. Maria passed by, and they met eyes, holding eye contact for a moment. He's confused, feeling as though she was staring at him. Away from the main area of the school, the master and butler walked into the nearby woods. Suddenly, Isabella drove her fist into Crow's gut, questioning what's with the filthy commoner. The wind is knocked out of him, and he crashes to a nearby tree from the magic-reinforced hit. Her eyes are filled with hate, as she curses the worthless peasant. She continued to take her anger out on her butler, hitting him endlessly as she released her anger toward the girl. Indignant that someone like her is going against a duke's daughter, Crow falls to the ground, unable to move from all the pain and injuries inflicted on him. His breath is ragged. Isabella was raised to be exceptionally cultured and intelligent, serving as the image of grace. However, the instant something doesn't go her way, she'll violently take her anger out on those around her. The noble turns around, finishes with the beating for now, and finds it pointless to continue. On the other hand, Crow is barely staying conscious and vomiting his insides. Considering how much blood he's lost, he knows his condition is dire. Things turn dark, and all he sees is his lady turning her back and uncaringly walking away. His vision fades, but returns soon after as he feels warmth filling his body up. Maria is seated beside him. She smiles upon seeing him wake up. As he turns to ask what she's doing there, the girl tells him not to push himself, as he was badly hurt after all. He then realizes that his injuries are gone, and asks if she's responsible. The girl says she healed him the best she could, using her light magic. It's a form of magic few possess, and is quite versatile in terms of usage. Having heard loud noises, she came to see what was happening, and was shocked to see his beaten body. With kind eyes, she asks if something happened. Standing up to properly bow, he bows and says it's none of her concern, but thanks her for saving him, adding that he'll repay her another day. She stops him, saying there's no need to rush off so quickly. Despite her explanation, he believes she wants her reward right away. Since it can't be helped, he fixes his suit and conjures a portal, leading to a place with treasures inside. She's shocked, recognizing the spatial magic tool. Magic tools are inventions that can even allow those born with no magic to use them. At first glance, they seem a convenient item countless people would use, but this isn't the case, given how inefficient they are for a country of magic users. Handing her bags of money, he asks her to consider his debt covered, but she argues that she can't accept all that. Returning the treasures, Maria says there's no need to thank her, as helping her was done out of concern. However, this leaves him in a tight spot. To accept a favor and be unable to return it would sully the name of his lady and her house. He takes a bottle of elixir, and great medicine capable of curing any ailment, and forces it into her hands, leaving the girl with no choice but to accept. With that settled, he considers the favor settled and tries to excuse himself. As he's leaving, she asks him to wait again and questions if it's really necessary to go so far for the people he serves. The awful wounds on his body were dealt by Isabella. Despite always working so hard, he's treated unfairly, and such a disgusting person is unworthy of his loyalty. Crow watched her mouth move, and hearing her words made something inside him bubble up. He takes a dagger out and quickly closes the gap between them, pointing the weapon at her neck and ordering her to shut her mouth. Seeing the sharp blade, she can only squeal. Out of respect for her treating his wounds, he's decided to let her off with a warning. However, the next time she dares insult his lady to his face, he'll make sure to mercilessly end her life in an instant. With that said, he excuses himself, having made his master wait too long. As she watches him, Maria notes that she still hasn't done enough for a certain flag. Crow walks through the mansion's halls and is immediately scolded for being late. Isabella is seated, complaining about mere butler making her wait and start a tea party without him. He gives a deep bow of apology, but she simply sighs and says she's grown parched while waiting. Understanding, he quickly gets to work and pours a hot cup of tea. Noticing her expression, the servant asks if something good happened while he was away. The noble giggles and says she's thought up a wonderful little spectacle. During tomorrow's practical exam, he'll be sure to witness something amusing. The practical magic exam is held for 2 classes. First are the magicians, who specialize in projecting their magic externally. Second are the knights, who specialize in using magic to strengthen their bodies for combat. Today, for the sake of measuring the kingdom's future guardians, a joint examination for both classes is held. Isabella takes the stage. Equipped with a magic staff, she conjures a ball of energy and engulfs the target in a sharp gust of wind magic, cutting it into pieces. The students watching do their best to guard themselves, nearly falling from the sheer force. Crow stands confidently, casting barrier magic and withstanding the blast without much trouble. The wind and dust settle, and the instructor says she's achieved excellence in power, accuracy, and casting speed, just to be expected from the Duke's daughter. She says he's too kind and that it's just the natural outcome. Crow looks at a pendant. It's a magic tool worth 100 gold coins, but was broken by the mere shockwave of her attack. He commends his master, but she scoffs and calls it a slight trifle. That said, the real show is just about to begin. He recalls her words from yesterday and how she talked about arranging something amusing. Considering her good mood, he wonders what he planned. Maria is then called for the examination. She steps forward with her sword as part of the night class. The others talk behind her back, although loudly insulting the equipment she's using. Isabella chuckles, waiting for her to proceed. According to her, there are 3 steps to casting magic. The first is to draw the mana out of one's body. Second is converting that mana into usable power. And the final is actually casting the spell. The magic gem embedded into a wand is a sort of catalyst, aiding the conversion of mana into power. Maria casts the spell, and Isabella watches in sinister delight, wondering what would happen if the magic gem was replaced with defective trash. The gem breaks, and the poor girl's mana began to grow uncontrollably large. She screamed, unable to control it despite everyone telling her to stop the spell. The girl struggles desperately, but to no avail. As the magic grew larger and more chaotic, the culprit laughed maniacally, saying it's what she gets for being a useless peasant, and enjoining everyone to look. Crow does nothing, satisfied as long as his master is enjoying herself. However, an eerie feeling suddenly crept in. It's killing intent. He looked through the crowd, looking for the source, but they're all just mindlessly running. That is, except for Maria, who is hiding a smile with eyes full of intent. He realizes who it's aimed at, and moves his body immediately. A huge explosion occurs, and the people do their best to protect themselves. Isabella falls on the floor with light grazes. Crow asks if she's okay, but she scolds him, sarcastically asking if she looks okay despite her torn clothes. However, she falls silent as she sees half his body blasted away, having put himself between her and the explosion. Her eyes quiver in shock, and she asks what happened. His body is torn apart, but he still apologizes for showing her something so unsightly. He falls to her shoulders, but is satisfied as he was able to protect his master. Hearing his ragged breath, reality strikes Isabella and she screams at everyone, ordering them to call for a healer, unwilling to watch her loyal servant die. Meanwhile, Maria falls to her knees in tears, not intending for this to happen, and blaming the noble for the misfortune that hit the butler. A man had no hope left in his life. He was a corporate slave, shackled to a black company, and lived in an aimless and lonely existence. Until he reached middle age, he often lamented over how it wasn't meant to be that way. One day, he came across a woman with eyes just as lifeless as his. He assumed she must be a fellow victim, and as he was feeling a sense of kinship, his vision was engulfed in white light. That night, a reckless driver obliterated them both. It was a ridiculous and meaningless tragedy. While cursing the world and questioning why he was so unfortunate, the man's life ended. In a fancy-looking room, someone woke up and looked at his hands in confusion. Their thoughts are muddled and mixed, as if having two brains thinking at the same time. He walked around and saw a mirror and was shocked to see Crow's face, finding it completely unfamiliar. Meanwhile, in a church's hall, Prince Albert asks Maria how she is, assuring her that there's no need to worry, as it was all just an accident. Looking at her, the girl realized immediately that she had just been reincarnated. After getting caught up in a ridiculous accident, she opened her eyes one day and found herself in a child's body, prancing around an orphanage. After looking at her reflection in a pool of water, she was stunned to find that her face was the same as Maria, a character from a romance game in her past life. With this, the two realized that they were in the world of an otome game called Jewel Prince. In the mansion garden, Isabella took a sip of tea, immediately complaining about the rancid taste. She distastefully scolds the servant, stunned that they're serving her garbage and asking if they think she's a fool. The maid bows her head low, apologizing and saying she'll make another. However, she's unable to do more, as the boiling cup is splashed on her, and the others are unable to do anything as she held her screen in. Again apologizing, she's silenced, and the master habitually calls for Crow. She falls silent, remembering what had happened. Another maid offers to brew more tea, but she orders them all to leave her alone. Taking a few snacks, she angrily asks how long her butler is going to lay around, saying it's rude to keep his master waiting. It's been a few days since the practical exam. Thanks to the efforts of healers, Crow survived, but hasn't woken up from his coma. According to physicians, the problem was his head injury, which may lead to his eternal rest if left untreated. Frustrated, Isabella whispers that he must wake up soon, otherwise she will prepare a punishment for him for making her wait. Meanwhile, Crow has already regained consciousness, but he stares into the mirror in complete shock as he realizes he is looking at a different man. He knows he is still Crow, yet at the same time, he feels like a completely different person. Desperately, he racks his brain, trying to remember what could have caused this change. He recalls standing at a traffic light, waiting for it to change when a car suddenly hit him. At the same time, he also remembers sacrificing himself to save his lady, Isabella, which left him greatly injured. Utterly confused, he struggles to understand why the word car keeps flashing in his mind. It's something he's never encountered before, and he has no memory of ever riding in one. Gripping his head in frustration, his thoughts race, and his head throbs from the onslaught of conflicting memories. In the back of his mind, he can feel fragments of memories that don't belong to his current life. They aren't the memories of the Crow he knows, but those of a man who lived and died miserably, consumed by despair. He grips his head, questioning who he is and insisting to himself that he is Crow and he is Isabella's butler. However, this reality clashes with another as a voice inside his head tells him that he is just another corporate slave, another disposable thing inside a worthless society. He calls himself completely delusional and laughs at how he comes up with the idea that he has a lady he is serving and that he is a butler, arguing with himself that it is just all a fantasy. It is impossible that this reality could even exist. After all, who would rely on someone like him? Frustrated, he crashes his head onto the mirror and punches the wall with his fist until it bleeds. He is demented and is close to going mad. He walks down the hall, panting as he goes since his injuries aren't fully healed yet. The voice in his head won't disappear, and he feels as if his existence in his world is slowly dissipating. The person that he is until now is starting to fade away along with his memories of Isabella. He then walks into a garden and sees the roses beautifully planted around the estate. He then turns and sees Isabella looking at him with surprise. Out of breath, he slowly walks toward her and suddenly hugs her to her shock. Startled, Isabella springs from her seat and berates Crow for his disrespect. With a helpless look on his face, he asks the woman who he is, which further confuses Isabella. In a panicked state, he screams at her, begging her to please tell him who he is. Isabella is appalled and decides to calm him down by hitting his head with force enough to make him almost unconscious. She looks at him with a serious look on her face, scolding him for leaving her alone and creating a fiasco as soon as he wakes up and spews ridiculous nonsense. She looks at him intently, stating that as his mistress, she will educate him. With a determined look on her face, she shouts in his face that he is Crow, her butler, and her personal property. After this declaration, she looks at him defiantly, and Crow realizes that she seems brazen in his eyes. He stops for a moment and remembers a distant memory that he cherishes deep inside his heart. During his darkest moment, a young Isabella walked up to him despite warnings that the boy was dirty and possibly dangerous. They told her that he wasn't an ordinary commoner, and that he was a slum dweller, so he was worse than actual dirt. Although he was just a child, his dark murky eyes tell otherwise, as he was certainly a beast and not a human being. However, she ignored the warnings and went closer to the boy and took a close look at him. She noted that he had a quite pretty face, and she had taken an interest in him. Lucky for him, she needed a servant and picked him up on a whim, naming him Crow. At present, Crow starts laughing, his voice echoing throughout the garden. Isabella looks at him as crazy, asking why he is suddenly laughing. Just then, he bows down to his knees as if worshipping her. He then apologizes to her after he has made her worry, adding that he was simply confused. However, now it is crystal clear to him. She turns away from him, stating that she wasn't worried at all. Crow smiles inwardly, calling himself foolish for even doubting who he is, when the most important thing is that he belongs to his lady, and that he is willing to sacrifice his life for her. He doesn't need anything other than to be at her side. As the night deepens, Crow stands atop a tall tower and observes the target he wants to teach a lesson. He admits that harassing the woman is a bit too much, but his lady's orders are absolute. Meanwhile, Maria is running frantically away from men chasing her. She pleads with them not to hurt her, but they corner her instead, ready to teach her a lesson. Isabella is sitting comfortably in her bed, asking Crow if he successfully threw Maria into the slums as ordered. He confirms this, assuring her that the girl she hates the most has been dealt with. Meanwhile, the thugs from the slum are closing into Maria, cornering her with ill intent. Shivering, she begs them to leave her alone, warning them they won't get away if they try to touch her. Despite this, the men close the gap, and she then uses a spell to protect herself. She effectively fends off the men who initially try to grab her, but the thugs are too many for her to handle alone. If she only has a sword, she can fight them and protect herself more. Just then, more men grab her and try to take advantage of her. She pleads with them to stop, but they are all deaf to her cries. She then screams for help, and suddenly, one of the men is cut down. A man named Ralph emerges from the shadow, enraged that the men are preying on Maria. He starts annihilating them as the others try to escape, regretting that they crossed the Wild Fang's boss. However, before they can completely run away, Ralph has already cut them down, creating a bloodbath. After annihilating the enemies, he approaches Maria and asks what she is doing in the slum. In between her sobbing, she admits that she is trying to take care of something. However, she knew that he was coming to save her. They hug each other as Maria weeps and buries her head on his chest, calling his name over and over. Meanwhile, Crow observes from a distance, stunned, that a slum boss arrives to save Maria from danger. Isabella is barely containing her anger as Crow reports that Maria survived the attack and returned to her home just minutes ago. Out of anger, she promptly kicks him in the face, making him bleed. She moves threateningly to him, stating that they all seem making fun of her, and for that, he must suffer. In his room, Crow chugs down a bottle of healing potion. He wonders how Maria managed to get so lucky, noting that whenever anything happens to her, someone is always there to save her. It is like the world is protecting her. He smirks, vowing to know her secret and figure out more about Maria. He contemplates the memories he has from his previous life. According to his memories, there were a lot of examples in the manga where people reincarnated in another world get a lot of special or cheat abilities. Most people would laugh at him if he told them this, but now that he has a glimpse of his power, he plans to use it to his advantage. He starts to wonder if he's just like the humans who have no mana, but eventually awaken their magical powers despite that. Now all he needs is to unlock the overwhelming magic within him. Focusing intensely, he tries to summon wind magic but fails. He gives it another shot, but nothing happens. Frustrated, he collapses to the floor, tears of frustration spilling out as his powers refuse to manifest the way he imagined. Trying to lift his spirits, he reminds himself not to give up. He still has the knowledge from his previous life as a reincarnator, and he vows to use that to his advantage. Just then, he notices that Ines, the maid, has quietly entered his room. She apologizes, explaining that she had been knocking, but he seemed too absorbed in his thoughts to hear her. Crow begins to sweat nervously, wondering if she had seen everything. He asks Ines what she needs. adding that he didn't give her permission to enter his room. She apologizes again, explaining that she got worried when he didn't respond, so she let herself in. He stays silent for a moment before asking how long she had been watching. Without any emotion on her face, she truthfully replies that she had been watching since he was arranging magic gems. Shocked and nervous upon hearing this, he realizes she saw him trying to awaken his powers or any potential cheat abilities he might have. Ainz offers to teach him magic if he needs help learning it. He silently berates himself for getting caught and for not having any overpowered abilities at all. Trying to keep his composure, he tells her to keep what she saw a secret between the two of them. He then asks her again what she needs, but she immediately apologizes, asking him to punish her for failing to protect him and for putting his life in danger. His thoughts flash back to the previous incident, and he realizes that her concern stems from that moment. He reassures her that he is fine, adding that it wasn't her responsibility. She tries to insist, but he dismisses her, firmly telling her to respect his decision. After all, he never expected them to act as bodyguards since they were merely orphans from the slums, hired at his own discretion. All of Isabella's original servants had quit due to her tyranny, leaving only those he had recruited. There were still other servants in the mansion, but none wanted to serve the lady. Thus he devised a plan to educate the orphans and mold them into pawns under his control. This way their lives will have some utility sense. In his view, they were expendable, and it was better to put the orphans to good use. Ainz expresses her gratitude and is about to leave when he pulls her close, parting her hair to reveal a severe burn on her face. Instantly, he knows Isabella must have inflicted the injury. Feeling bad for her, he hands her a bottle of healing potion, instructing her not to show her ugly burn to the lady. She accepts the potion with gratitude and quietly leaves. Now alone in his room, he reflects on how he has followed Isabella's orders without question. While it's true that he owes her for saving him from the streets, her daily absurd orders and the way she beats him like a punching bag are beginning to weigh on him. Frustration gnaws at him, and he tells himself that it isn't fair. He begins laughing maniacally, his demented laughter echoing through the corners of the room. Although his reincarnation didn't grant him any cheat powers, it left him with one thing from his past life: anger and loathing. With a deranged look on his face, he vows to teach his lady a lesson she will never forget.